Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Study Smarter IAL Edexcel YouTube channel. With exams just around the corner, we can definitely understand how stressful things can get. So that's why we've decided to do a quick video explaining all the language frameworks which are common across the whole course of English language, Edexcel English Language. These are applicable in all units, but they're more particularly, these are more common and more useful in Unit 1 and Unit 3. So we begin, Bismillah. The problem with most students is that they don't understand the meanings or the definitions of these language frameworks. So if you're not comfortable with what the language framework means, you don't know what you're looking at, what you're looking for, you can't really include it nicely in your analysis. So we begin by exploring the definitions. We make sure that we're comfortable with what they mean. So when we start writing the analysis, we know what we're looking for. So we start with mode, the most basic, of course. It's the method of communication. So it means method of communication or the way the message is conveyed. Meaning, is the text spoken? Is the text published online? Is it spoken or written, or is it multimodal? Is it both? A text can be multimodal for sure. For example, an example of a multimodal text can be a speech that was given at a place. Later, the transcript was published online, so it's multimodal. Then we move on to the lexis. The word lexis is just a fancy word for vocabulary or word choice. And examiners really like the students, they want the students to write lexis in place of any other synonym for vocabulary, honestly. So you want to include this, you want to make reference to these language frameworks that are highlighted here, using their names, okay? So it shows in your text that you know what you're talking about, and you make clear references to these language frameworks. So lexis, basically the word choice, the language of the text. So when I would do lexis analysis of a text, I would include certain points, and I had them limited so that every single time I'm just doing those and I'm not going beyond those 4, 5, 6 points. So if you have a plan in your mind, your analysis is not all over the place. So that's what I would suggest, is that choose 5 or 6 points that you're going to discuss in lexis or syntax or even other language frameworks, and just stick to them. So the first one that I would do is positive and negative lexis. So words that have positive connotation, words that have negative connotations. So I would talk about them. Any of those that I would see in both texts or even in one text, I would discuss that. And then I would talk about emotive language, of course. Whenever I would talk about emotive language, I would also talk about ethos, pathos, that really bring substance to your analysis. Then I would also talk about high and low frequency lexemes. And to just quickly tell you what these are, because of the shortage of time, we can't get into too much detail. But high frequency lexemes are the common words, like even from here, this PDF that I am writing on right now, I can tell you, well, this is a common word, this is a common word. All of these are common words, right? We use them commonly in everyday language. So the high frequency lexemes, did I miss it? Lexemes. So high frequency lexemes are the common language, basically. It can be noun, it can be verbs, pronouns, etc. So it's just a common language. Low frequency lexemes, on the other hand, are those that are not as common. So it's uncommon and, in fact, common formal language. And just to give you an example why an author or a writer, speaker would use low frequency lexemes, is because they want to emphasize social divide, for example. They want to establish themselves maybe above the listeners. maybe above the audience. So it creates a social divide. Then we move on to, in fact, before I move on to syntax, there are a few more things you can include in lexis, like common lexis, for example, lexis of family, lexis of school, hygiene. These are things that you're going to see repeatedly highlighted in the marking scheme, right? So you can quickly give the text a read, and you can quickly tell, okay, this is lexis of family, this is lexis of school, lexis of hygiene. So you include that in your analysis. You can also, of course, comment on colloquialisms. You can comment on compound words that use hyphen, for example. So if I give an example of a compound word, this would be a compound word. And why an author might use these? Well, these sometimes reflect the author's distinctive style. Some people like to be more articulate in their writing. Others completely just go with the flow kind of writing. They just don't really care about how their writing looks. So this, by the way, links to graphology, which we're going to get into in a few minutes, inshallah. Then we move on to syntax. Syntax is basically refers to the grammar of the writing of the text. So when you're doing the syntactical analysis of the texts, you can talk about sentence order. Sentence order is the way the words are ordered in a sentence. So the standard sentence order is SVO, which it stands for a subject, verb, object, in case you didn't know that. So you can compare two texts and see if the author follows standard sentence order, or is it shifted? Is it more towards being non-standard? Then you can talk about tenses, you can talk about articles, prepositions, pronouns, verb usage. You can talk about all of grammar, basically. All that you know of grammar, you can talk about it. This particularly is important when you talk about Unit 2, because in Unit 2 you have two different texts from two different speakers, meaning one can be from Asia, the other can be from America. So they're going to follow a completely different syntax, right? So basically talking about the language varieties, they follow different syntax. They have their varieties have different syntax. So you can make these points about syntax, particularly in Unit 2. With reference to Unit 2, when you're talking about different varieties of English, there will be, with regards to the prepositional usage, there are going to be certain shifts that you're going to see. So in standard English, we have a set usage of prepositions, but in different varieties, you might see interchangeable use of two different prepositions. So interchangeable use, you might see, and just remove this from here. Okay, so interchangeable use, or completely skipping the preposition, or substitution. This one is particularly for Unit 2. Okay, because you're comparing two different varieties, so they're going to show different features, syntactical, lexical. So yeah, you can compare that. Moving on to graphology. Graphology is the visual elements of the text. So it's like what visual elements the author has used. So maybe listing, bullet points, and subheadings. So these are like easy marks. So if you can compare the graphology of two different texts, you can check off a marking scheme point in your answer. Moving on to audience. So audience, we already know what audience is. It's the people the text is targeted at. You want to talk about audience in Unit 1 when you're writing your analysis. In Section A, you want to talk about audience when you're you can talk about it in Unit 2 as well, but it's not that important because in Unit 2 you have other things, phonology, morphology, so it's not that important, but if you include it, of course, that's going to be a plus point. Audience is particularly important again in Unit 3 with reference to Section B. In Section B, you're going to, in Section A, you choose an audience. In Unit 3, you're choosing an audience. And then in Section B, when you start analyzing your own text, you keep the audience in mind, and then you analyze accordingly. So that's that. Moving on to purpose. Of course, it's the reason behind the text or the function of the text. Again, it's important for Unit 1 and 3. Yes, I should write this for all actually, Unit 1 and 3 again. Graphology basically applies to all actually. So Unit 1, 3, not 2, and 4. Syntax, all units. Lexis, of course, all units. And mode is for Unit 1, 2, and 3, not 4. So then we move on to field. Now field is the context of the text or the topics being discussed. I would think of field as the topics being discussed. So it was easy for me to, because I knew what it was, I could easily just read the text and pinpoint, okay, it's this, this, this. So when I talk about field, a text might have several topics being discussed. I mean, it's going to have a general topic, a topic, that overall topic of the text. For example, a text can be talking about water, for example. Okay, it's talking about importance of water. Okay, that's the overall heading, that's the overall topic. But as the speaker or the writer discusses the importance of water, they might also discuss some other problems associated with importance of water. So for example, they might talk about for example, an inaccessibility of clean water in some parts of the world. So that's a different field that's being discussed. So you can write, maybe add this field, just include this field of inaccessibility of clean water across the world or across the globe or in Asia or whatever. So that's a subfield. Okay, so you look in the context of importance of water, there are going to be some subfields that will be discussed or referenced throughout the text. So you find those and you include those when you're talking about field in your answer. Now we move on to some writing and analysis techniques, which are important for Unit 1, Section A, and Unit 3, the entire Unit 3. Now these are some techniques that you can use when you're composing your answer, when you're writing. For example, this is particularly for Unit 3. So these are particularly important for Unit 3. These techniques you can include in your answer while you're constructing your answer for Section A. So if you're writing, let's say your question is to write a blog, so you include these things while you're writing, and when you start analyzing your own text, you can make a reference to these. So that's going to give substance to your analysis of your own text. So when we talk about parallel syntax, we're talking about matching grammatical structure, basically. So it's a technique that writers use to create rhythm or flow or clarity in your text. So it is matching grammatical structure. You use repeatedly the same grammatical structure. You're stating the same idea using the same grammatical structure. So to give you an example, for example, she likes to swim, to bike, and to run. So do you see you see the grammatical structure, which is the repeated grammatical structure is the same: to swim, to bike, to run. Okay, now this is an example of parallel syntax. So you can include while you're writing Unit 3, Section A. When you start analyzing your own text, you can add a comment that the text, my own text, shows the usage of parallel syntax to create rhythm, flow, clarity in the text. Then we move on to the rule of three, which is also known as triads. It's very similar. You might think, well, parallel syntax and parallel syntax and the rule of three is the same thing, but it's not. It's actually, you're just using three elements for emphasis. So you use three similar words. It's the rule of three, so it cannot be more than this. But here in parallel syntax, I could just include another one here, you know. So there's no set rule here when you talk about parallel syntax. But when you're talking about triads, it's the rule of three, so you only use three. So words that have similar idea, you put them together to create. This is used for it's a rhetorical device. It's used to create the text more, whatever the writing, more memorable, more effective. Again, it adds flow to your writing. It looks good. I mean, there's something, gives substance to your writing, so you have something to comment on. You're just not writing random stuff, right? So love, faith, hope, they are all positive words. They have somewhat of the same idea. The key idea is the same, but you use them, similar words, you put them together, make a triad, which gives rhythm in your writing. So you can include this in section A. Then we talk about euphemisms and dysphemisms. Now, euphemism is a polite or mild expression. So polite or mild expression, and these are used to, it's like a softer way to say something that might be hard or unpleasant or offensive. So it's like a harsh comment or an unpleasant news wrapped in silk cloth, if that makes sense. So for example, we say, let me just give you an example. Instead, someone says passed away instead of died. So they might say passed away to reduce the shock in the news and to appear more polite and be more like socially acceptable in your language. So you just don't throw the news at the other person by using this direct, blunt word. Instead, you use a euphemism and you say passed away. Okay, so it's a polite or mild expression which is used to reduce the shock. And the dysphemism is the exact opposite of this. It is a blunt expression or a harsh expression. Blunt or harsh expression. And these are used to shock, offend, criticize. So they're used for exact opposite reasons. Meaning for euphemism, you're using a polite or mild expression to not give the other person a shock or to offend the other person, but you use dysphemism, which is a harsh or blunt expression, for the exact same reasons. So, or to criticize even. To criticize, shock, or offend someone. And so, for example, an example would be, if I give you an example, using slacker for someone who's unmotivated, lazy, procrastinating. So you use the word slacker. So the purpose of using dysphemism would be to criticize, insult, or create a strong emotional reaction which might motivate action, if that makes sense. So talking about Unit 3, Section A, which is something people... Okay, so listen. for Unit 3, you need to understand the marks distribution. So Section A is 20 marks, okay? Section B is 30 marks. The problem with students is that they spend so much time composing, writing the best article, the best speech of their life. I mean, come on, guys, you have 20 marks for this. It's a big chunk of your grade. So you want to spend less time on this and more time on this. So let's say if you have 2 hours, I mean, you can develop your own strategy, but to give you an example, you can spend like 45 minutes on this one and the rest of the time in Section B, because when you start analyzing your own text, there's so many things you can comment on, but if you run out of time, that's going to be terrible and devastating, and you don't want to do that, right? So make sure that you have the correct time allocation for each section, so you're able to achieve maximum marks in each section. So let's talk about how to write better in Section A of Unit 3. So of course you read your text and you might even annotate quick, and then after you're done reading the text, you move on to the second step, which is a quick plan. I'm telling you, you're not going to write something that's effective, that has substance to it, if you don't plan. All of your ideas are going to be all over the place, and then you're going to realize that you've not created something that is effective or is even close to being good like 15 minutes before your time is over, and you're going to be devastated. So you don't want to do that. So you quickly plan. So how do you plan? Well, a quick way to plan would be that I use personally is use a thesis statement. You read the text and then you read the question prompt, and then you try to analyze, okay, what's required of me? And then when you understand, okay, this is required of me, you take a small section of the page and just write raw draft on it, and then you can just cut it off when you're done planning, so that the examiners don't really consider it as something that's a part of your answer. So you write a thesis statement. So how do you do that? Once you understand, okay, this is required of me in the exam, then you write down in words that, okay, in my text I'm gonna do A, B, C, D. So let me explain this. So let's say your topic is you talk about global warming. Okay, so topic is global warming. And you are required to talk about the cause and effect of global warming. Okay, what has led us here, for example. So you start writing something like this. It's like your intent. You make your intent clear with the text that you're going to start writing in after you're done with your thesis statement. So you can say, well, in this writing, this is for you. This is not for the examiner, okay? So you can write, well, in this writing or in this article or whatever, I'm going to talk about the causes of global warming and its effects. You can just continue writing. You can include, well, my text is going to have these many sections. In the first section, I'm going to write this, and you give like solid 5 or 10 minutes to this. It really gives, gives your writing and a meaning, in a sense, like your intention with the text. You start writing and you keep going back to the thesis statement and you're like, am I doing this while you're writing? Go back to the thesis statement and check, am I achieving my purpose or not? So that's the first step, is that you read the text. The second step is you do a quick plan. You write down a quick plan on the first page and you can just cut it off later. And then you start writing and you make sure that you're not exceeding the time limit, and then you can check. Once you're done writing, match your text with the thesis statement. Of course, you cannot do this in the exam room, so that's why I'm suggesting that you start doing it from now. So when you're in the exam room, you're more, you start using more meaningful structuring in your answer. That is basically it. With regards to, since we don't have much time, we can just quickly discuss how to allocate time, or how to finish your paper in time here as well quickly. So how do you finish your paper in time? For AS students, first, you need to have a good practice, meaning if right now you don't have exams, there are still a few more, maybe 2 weeks before your exam. So start practicing from now. Practice, do timed practice right now. It shouldn't be that you go in the exam room and it's the first time you're writing in 1 hour 45 minutes. It shouldn't be. You shouldn't give yourself a shock. So what I would do is, since I had more time before my exam, I would allocate time for each of the language framework. First, I would make a list. So I would make a list on the question paper. So I would write mode, field, etc., all the things that I wanted to discuss. I would make a checklist, and then I would allocate, while practicing at home, I would allocate, okay, 2 minutes for mode, 3 minutes for field. So if I go back here, it depends on the length and the depth of each language framework. Some take more time. So talking about mode, I would tell myself, okay, no more than 2 minutes for mode. Then for lexis, I would usually give myself 10 minutes. And by the way, this is not the mode of only one text. For unit 1, you're comparing 2 texts, so you're going to take into account the mode of text A, mode of text B. Do things side by side. Then the lexis of both the texts for 10 minutes, then around 8 minutes for syntax, around, this would take me 5 minutes for graphology, around 5 to 7 minutes for audience. And this is, I'm not telling you random estimates. I've done a lot of practice, and so I know usually if you have a decent writing speed, you can finish it in 5 to 7 minutes, and this would be in about 5 minutes as well. And of course, I had more language frameworks that I would include in my answer, even this course, for example. So there are other things that would be in my list, and I would just time each language framework. So that's, and then I would just add it all up. So let's say this would take me, 5 to 7 minutes again, because it's hard finding all the fields from the whole text, right? So, and then I would just add all this time up, and it would tell me, okay, it's going to take me this much time just discussing the language frameworks. Then I would move on to gender, social, cultural factors, context and identity, etc. And of course, yes, before I finish this, you need to include theories. Theories are so important. Theories are important for all units. Unit 1, I'm going to give you a quick example for theories in each unit. So, yeah. So for unit 1, you're going to include dominance. In case you don't already know, I'm just going to list a few here so you can just go and research them on your own and include them in your answer. Dominance and difference theory, convergence and divergence. These were my must. So convergence and divergence. For unit 2, well, of course, for unit 2, you can write convergence and divergence. You can make reference to these, that works, but there was, for example, I would do markedness theory. You can just look them up. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to write all the names that I can remember off the top of my head, then you can just go and research them. So markedness theory, substrate influence, what else? Yeah, you can write received pronunciation as well. Received Sorry, my bad. Received pronunciation, fossilization even. And fossilization. For Unit 3, these are the same as these. So you can dominance, difference, convergence, and divergence. You can apply these theories to your own self because you're going to first create the text and then analyze your own text. So you can make reference to convergence, how your own text, how you've used certain lexis to converge with the audience or to diverge with the audience. They're the same as Unit 1. And for Unit 4, you do have some here. Since my topic is language and power, I can only discuss the theories that you're going to use in language and power. I'm not sure if you can use the same for other subtopics, research topics. But for those of you who are doing language and power, you can use speech act theory. You have discourse and power, the theory of discourse and power. And you can even make reference to critical discourse analysis. And yeah, well, that's it. These are the major ones. So if you include these in your answer has more substance to it. There's more that authors, more the examiners can read and analyze and give you marks for. So that's it. With regards to how to finish the paper in time, just make a checklist, allocate time for each language framework, try to finish them in time. While you're at home, while you still have time before your exam, start practicing it from today. And if you do that, you're going to develop a certain speed that if you practice writing mode in 2 minutes enough times, even without a timer in the exam room, you're going to finish it in around roughly 2 to 3 minutes. So that's a benefit there. So try to finish your language frameworks in time, and then you can move on to section B. Then talking about A2 students, you have more time, you have 2 hours. So I would, what I do right now is take out 15 minutes for reading texts, because if you don't understand what's going on in the text, you can't really do much. You can't really create your writing for section A in Unit 3, and you can't really compare 2 texts in Unit 4 section A. So 15 minutes for reading the texts, then you're left with 1 hour 45 minutes. So for Unit 3, 45 minutes for section A, and the rest of the time, which is 1 hour for section B. And for Unit 4, Unit 4 section A is also 20 marks, and section B is 30 marks. So you can use the similar time distribution. 45 minutes for section A, and then 1 hour for section B. I hope that helps. This is it for this video. I would have liked to cover more things, but we're short on time. You're short on time. You have exams, I have exams. So that's it for this video. Inshallah, maybe in summer vacation we can do more things together. For those of you who are in AS, stick around. Inshallah, there's going to be more stuff for AS and A2. The things that you learn in AS are so helpful in A2, so I would suggest that over the summer vacation you keep revising the stuff you've done for AS, so you don't forget. When you come into A2, you already have a solid foundation. That's it. I hope you find it beneficial. Assalamu alaikum.